No, I'm kidding.
All right. Welcome everyone to ACDA Speaker Series event, Conversations or Voices from the Music Building, a conversation with disabled musicians. My name is Pia Satana and I am the president of the ACDA SJSU chapter. And today I'm joined by Elizabeth Allen, Jimmy Cong, Briana Lotan, and Dr. Gary Packwood. And so we're going to kind of introduce each other. Elizabeth, would you like to go first?
Sure. So I am Elizabeth Allen, as Pia said. I am a junior plus at San José State, studying music education with the goal to go into choral conducting. So.
Hey.
All right. Thank you, Elizabeth. Jimmy, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Hello, my name is Jimmy Cong. I am an alumni at UC San Diego. I was a double major, so I was a music composition major and a visual arts digital media major. My disability is I'm legally blind, and my disability is retinoblastoma, which is a tumor in my eye. I had it since birth, so I am currently working as a disability specialist at the Office for Students with Disabilities at my campus. And I DJ on the side before the pandemic hit. DJ events and weddings around whoever decides to hire me. And that's basically kind of a little bit about myself.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jimmy. Briana, do you want to go next?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Briana Lotan, and I am a first-year grad student at Shenandoah University, studying vocal pedagogy for contemporary commercial music. And my disability is I am a paraplegic, and I've been in the music world now for a long time. I got my undergrad at Coker University, and I've been teaching privately now for about 8 years.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Briana. And Dr. Packwood, take it away.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Gary Packwood, and I am the Program Administrator and Director of Choral Activities at Mississippi State University in Starkville, Mississippi. My disability is I'm a right arm amputee. As a conductor, you can imagine that. And that occurred during my doctoral studies at Louisiana State University. I was in a car accident and I had to have my right arm amputated. So I guess many of my years as an educator, I taught elementary and I taught elementary and high school music in South Florida. And then in 2000, I went back to LSU and my accident happened in 2001.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all of that background so we can kind of get to know, where each of you are coming from. So to start off our discussion, what in your experiences, what are some of the challenges or triumphs that you've faced with accessibility in the music world, specifically in your school or in your professional environment? We have such a wide variety of different disabilities, so it would be really interesting to hear what your experiences are in that.
I guess I can begin. So basically, what I experienced being a music and visual arts major, you might think, oh, well, music must be the most accessible since he's blind and low vision. But today I'm going to debunk the myth, basically, or debunk a type of thinking, and actually say that visual arts is more accessible. Why do you say this? Well, visual arts has, when you're making a video, there's so much more accessible apps out there. One of them is Apple's Final Cut Pro. You don't have to use your vision to actually editing that piece of software. If you know keyboard shortcuts, you can use your keyboard. That's amazing because I don't have to look at the screen. I just need to listen to the audio of the clip. And I also don't need to make sure that I need to strain my eyes, or if anybody who can't use the mouse, they can use switch controls to actually navigate the timeline, which is amazing. Now, why is music so much more difficult? Well, besides reading Braille music for all of the scores that I need to like analyze and stuff, the biggest concern that I have is music software. Now, music software is not accessible. A lot of the industry standard pieces of software for music are not accessible. This is seen a lot, especially in writing music, like popular pieces of music notation software like Finale or MuseScore. Sibelius is getting better, but the thing is Sibelius is still really, really difficult to learn for anybody. So the learning experience, even for a screen reader user, is very hard. So that's why it's very difficult for me to actually work with groups of people because these music notation pieces of software are not accessible. Furthermore, other pieces of notation, other pieces of music software that are not accessible include Ableton, even DJ software that I use. You would think, oh, DJ software is kind of like iTunes or Spotify. And, Apple Music and Spotify, they're both very accessible. But unfortunately, DJ software is not. What you would think it would be accessible because it's just a list of songs. But no, it's not accessible. It doesn't read at all. None of these programs are read to the screen reader. And that's very unfortunate. And that's one of the biggest problems I run into when I'm working in the arts, because it's always a hit or miss with music software. Visual arts, luckily we have Apple's Final Cut Pro on my side, so I can create content with along with other people in the industry. So that's basically the challenges I face for sure.
That's really fascinating, Jimmy. And you kind of mentioned all of this when we had our meeting last week. And as an able-bodied person, that's, music software is the last thing that I think about in terms of accessibility. So I think it's really awesome that, you're doing work with that and sharing the things that we don't really think about so much.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Packwood, would you like to share on this?
Sure. Well, the world is really made for able-bodied people, and you don't really think about it until you have to. Even if you break your arm or something, then all of a sudden you sort of realize things are, and even I would say that for able-bodied as well as for right-handed people, you sort of realize all these things. So as a musician and as I do a lot of conducting with orchestras and choirs, lots of all states and honor choirs and things like that. So in that realm, it was, I had to make quite a bit of adjustments. And I started off, one of the things I had to learn to do, if you're working from a full score of music, there are many staves. So I started reprinting the music and making it so I had fewer pages to turn. If I'm conducting and I have to turn a page, then I literally have to stop conducting. And so those kind of things, figuring if I'm conducting something in 4, I try to turn the page on 2. So when I cross my body, I grab the page and there is 3 and then 4. And now after about 10 years, it's mostly memorizing. I mostly memorize much of my score in order to keep things easy for myself as well as for the musicians that I work with. I've been fortunate that I don't have a lot of situations with individuals who create problems for me. I've been very fortunate in that aspect, and usually they are more accommodating than I even want them to be. Wanting to do probably some things that I'm more comfortable just doing myself. So in an everyday aspect, you as a musician, it's simple things like when I get in the car to drive, I've got to make sure everything is right there. There's no digging for anything once I get on the road. I can't be looking for, let me, and we do that, we shouldn't do that, but we all, have a habit of checking our phones or looking and doing those types of things. But when I get in the car, I've got to make sure everything, if I'm going to have a bottle of water, I've got to make sure it's where it is. So if I stop at a red light, I can take a quick sip and those type things. So a lot of it comes down to preparation for me as far as experience with things more than with individuals.
Thanks so much, Dr. Packwood. Briana, in our conversation last week, you brought up some really interesting points about like your experiences with musical theater. Would you like to kind of speak on that?
Absolutely. So I was a performance major in my undergrad, and so when as a person in a wheelchair, you're definitely always looking for like an accessible space, or how can we make this more accessible or adaptive and accommodating. And thankfully, Coker University was absolutely wonderful and really shined a light, and we grew together in the 4 years. And by the time I got to my senior year, we were making ramp sets and different ways that I could get in and out. I played Snoopy my sophomore year, and they made a ramp up to the doghouse. It was really, really wonderful. I think still some of the struggles that, of course, being wheelchair bound is the accessibility of things. So if you go to like a theater in New York or DC, some of the older towns, they're not always the most accessible. And then it's the things that people really don't think about is like the dressing rooms. You're like, oh, it's such a huge space, of course it's accessible. But then you go to the restroom and it's like, oh, how's this supposed to work? So that was one of the biggest struggles. Thankfully, though, we had a couple of the restrooms outside of the dressing rooms that I could use. But it's always just like the little things that sometimes like we forget to think about. I was recently just in at Shenandoah. We did a virtual Rodgers and Hammerstein review, and it was the curtain that was the challenge this time, which that's never happened to me before. But thankfully, of course, the crew was really awesome and helped me with the curtain, because they had all the filming wires, and they're like, okay, this is the spot you can travel through. And I was like, okay, cool. But thankfully, I think, especially with Ali Stroker, getting a lot of FaceTime in the musical theater world, hopefully we're leaning more towards accessibility in some of those older buildings in the shows, and kind of starting to think outside the box when it comes to characters like Ado Annie. You wouldn't expect a what is that period? Territorial period, right? Before Oklahoma was even a state, to have someone in a wheelchair, right? But they completely rewrote it and showered light onto a really awesome character that Ali Stroker did fantastic with. But yeah, so I mean, it's really about the accessibility of the space and the individuals really wanting to kind of just open their mind. I was able to learn about contact improv which is very big with people in wheelchairs, which I thought was really awesome. And that's, you use the chair and your space, and you just kind of like roll over each other and in these really awesome articulate dance phrases. That was really cool. But yeah, that's the experience there.
That's really, really fascinating. Elizabeth, you also have some pretty unique experiences with this, yeah?
Yeah, so I was born with a condition that affected my legs. I'm missing the smaller bone in my legs, and so my legs didn't grow in exactly straight. And it also affected my hands. It's kind of an unusual condition, but especially to have it be both sides. And then, so as a music major, of course, you're expected to learn all of these instruments. And so that has been an interesting challenge. And then, of course, I've been in choirs for years and years, and it took me far too long to realize that music stands are the way to go. And that but yeah, I have been really lucky to have so many wonderful teachers and friends who were really interested in helping me find creative solutions. I had a piano teacher at my junior college who like would basically play all of my pieces with me so that I would only have to do one hand of the music. And it's been finding solutions like that. I'm learning brass this semester, and so trombone was entertaining, because obviously I don't have that kind of reach, but you know, you can do a lot with holding a slide with your foot or something like that. And it's finding creative solutions. And so the biggest like accessibility thing I've run into is just that no one has encountered anyone that looks like me before. And so it's always a journey with each new class and each new teacher to figure out how we're going to make it work in this situation. And I have been incredibly fortunate to have teachers who were really happy to find solutions for me. And San Jose State has been amazing with that. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating how you know, you said that some of the modifications you've had to make because of your disability. I remember you previously in our discussion before talked about you know, how Alexander technique really changed the
Yes.
way that you approached your own singing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So one of the things that it took me way too long to figure out, it took my voice teacher like talking to me here at San Jose State to realize that because I do everything like basically with my shoulders forward, because like it's the equivalent of doing everything at about where your elbows are. And like I figured out how to do everything, but it means that my shoulders are forward all the time. And so then when I have to sing, it took like more effort than I expected to really get this open, because for those who aren't singers, getting a good breath and having good posture is hugely important to getting good quality of sound and to be able to have full stamina to make it through pieces. And it took me a very long time to figure out that's why I was having problems, was because of my shoulders and even the way I stand differently because of the way my legs are. And at the end of last semester, I had a bunch of teachers recommend that I seek out an Alexander technique specialist. And Alexander technique is a method, she's helped me with a lot. I think the main thing that people get referred to for them is like breath control and like that's been what I've heard people talk about it. But the lady who I went to, she is amazing and knows a lot about the human body, and so has been able to be like part Alexander technique specialist and like part physical therapist who actually understands how performing works. And so she's been amazing in figuring out how to actually correct all the posture things that have been causing problems for ages. And so that was a really, really helpful thing to find.
Yeah. all of these are really interesting points to kind of think about, you know, like physically how you do your job, how you are a musician and do the things that you do. And in our previous conversation, we also talked a lot about, you know, the interpersonal relationships that you build with people. And so I think this just leads me to my next question, which is, what are some of the best responses or some of the worst responses you've had to your disability, personally or professionally? And what are some of your best and worst experiences interacting with people who don't know you as well?
So for me, just like what Elizabeth said, the professors that I really love working with are those who really think inclusively, not just even just towards me, but towards all of the all the class members that they teach. Now, what does this mean? Well, it could mean they have this lesson planned out like months or weeks or months in advance, just to make sure that they if I need something brailled, which does take a long time. It takes like about 4 weeks to get music brailled. um, at least they have the materials ready to go, ready to be printed, and basically so we can give it to the transcriber. That's amazing when professors do that. It's and I'm very fortunate because UC San Diego has some amazing professors, and we also not to sound like I'm plugging my job, but the Office for Students with Disabilities did a great job, and because they allowed me to participate in the classes fully with my other peers, which is very important. Now, the worst experience, because there's always some worse experiences, is there was this one class. It was studying music from the Renaissance period and then older, so Gregorian chant and stuff like that. Now, the professor said, and I quote, "I have taught blind people before, and I just don't think you can pass this class because I just think it's too fast paced, and I just don't think that there's a way to be accommodating." Now, this professor didn't even give me the scores required for the first day of class until the first day of class. Now, the quarter system at UC San Diego is 10 weeks. So the first day of class, 4 weeks to get it transcribed. So it's already week 4. Week 5 is when midterms are. So of course I was scrambling. I was just analyzing the music by just listening to it. And I always I thought that I was doing very well because, you know, I can listen to the motifs and all the different types of you know, cantus firmus stuff, and I thought I was doing very well. But apparently I wasn't, and this professor wasn't willing to work with me. So that, unfortunately, there's those types of situations that you're just kind of like, I wish that we had a better situation, but however, you kind of just have to live with it. And those are the professors that really need to think about designing the class more inclusively. Now, I think I forgot who mentioned this earlier in this call, but the arts are very competitive. It's a very competitive field. Now, why do I say the arts? Well, music and filmmaking. Now, as a blind and low vision individual, it's very difficult for me to actually work with groups because they feel like maybe it's a burden to work with me. Furthermore, when I DJ, I have to compete with all of the other DJs out there that can see better than me, that you know, like that basically maybe even clients don't feel comfortable of hiring me because of because maybe I will screw up their visuals during their big day, like their wedding or something. So of course, for me, when someone does hire me, I try to give it the best that I can. And believe me, I enjoy DJing a lot, especially for events like weddings and stuff. So there's always some best experiences, some worst experiences. The best ones are when people are more inclusive, and the worst ones are when people really assume and basically don't believe that you can do something in particular. So
Yeah, you talk about this idea of like having to prove yourself. And I remember Dr. Packwood, you had a really good point to make about proving yourself when we had our conversation. I'm not sure if you remember what you said.
I don't know what I said, but I'm old, so that happens a lot when I forget what I say. But I'll just say I'll give you two examples of work of a situation. When I was first hired at Mississippi State, I was in my office and I have these huge bay windows in my office, and I had my back to the door and to my office door, and my secretary, I think she had stepped away from her desk or something, and this lady walked right into my office, and she said, "Hi, I'm blah blah blah. You're the new choir director, aren't you?" And so I turned around. I was sitting at my desk, looking outward, so she couldn't really see my body. And I turned around to acknowledge her, and she said to me, "Oh my, how is it that we hired a one-armed conductor?" Is what she actually said those words. And I said, "Well, during this time," she told me who she was. I said, "It's probably the same way in which they hire women to lead CEO companies and things like that. They do that. And she was a woman of a CEO company. That's why I said that." And so that's kind of how we started. So it was kind of rocky. That was probably the worst, sort of shocking kind of, I think she just said what came to her mind, which is never a good idea. I try to tell people don't do that. And then one of the best situations I've had is I was once in New York conducting the New England Chamber Orchestra. And if you are a choral conductor or aspiring choral conductor, if you don't know this is what you will learn, is that orchestras don't think very much of you if you are a choral conductor. Now, something has happened in history, and that's our plight in the world. So just be ready if you have to stand in front of string players or a symphony orchestra. Hey, darling, they will sort of put you through the test. And so I go to my rehearsal. I've had a 2-hour rehearsal with the orchestra, and I have my 2-hour rehearsal with them. And then the concert, I think it's 2 or 3 days later. The other time I'm rehearsing with the choir, and we put it all together. And at Carnegie Hall, if you've been backstage Carnegie Hall, the dressing rooms are a couple flights above where the hall is. So it takes a little, and the quickest way is to take the stairs, but you can go to the elevators, but they're slow and they're a distance away. So most people just take the stairs. So I took the stairs up after a performance and went to the room, and I was just kind of like, taking a breath and feeling, great and everything. And I hear a knock on the door, and I said, "Come in." And it was the concertmaster who came in, and he came up just to tell me if he had been playing with that New England Symphony Orchestra for 20 some years. And he said, "You're not one of the best choral conductors we've had." He says, "You're one of the best conductors that we've ever had." And he made that a point, and I took that because I know how they feel about us, okay? And he made the effort to come backstage to tell me that. That was a great, as someone who is still, after almost 20 years of being an amputee, I still get a little self-conscious about that aspect, especially in front of ensembles that I don't know. And I'm in front of ensembles that I don't know a lot, but there's always just a little bit of something in me until I start. And once I start, then I'm fine. So, and it's sort of, it's reciprocal, I think. I've had people come up and actually apologize to me for what they were thinking before we started. And I think that's a lot, that shows a great deal of character for them. And so I've just sort of learned to live and navigate that. But most of the time people don't say, the only people who say what they really think are little kids. So if I'm somewhere, a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old, they'll come right up to me and say, "What happened to your arm?" You know, and I'll tell them. Now the parents are usually mortified. The parents are just like, "Ah!" And they will do that, and I love that. I love it because I get on their level and I tell them I was in a car accident and what happened, and they say, "Okay," and then they're off. That's all. They don't care about it. Versus being somewhere and adults who stare, they look at you and then they look away because you look at them and then they look to see, you know, there's this kind of staring thing that goes on. So I love little kids who come up and just do it because they just want to know, and then 5 seconds later they could care less. They're like, "Okay, bye," you know, they're on their way.
I get that all the time too, and it's adorable. The parents are always scandalized, and I'm just like, they're great. I love kids.
Elizabeth, do you want to take a shot at this question?
Sure. I am fortunate enough to not have any like horrible horror stories. I mean, it's just people always assume, well, most people are kind enough to not say it, but like people always kind of assume that you aren't going to be able to do as much as you can do. And the best experiences though that I've had, especially in the music world, are when I go into a class and especially when I came to San Jose State, I realized that I needed to make this an open conversation with all my professors, and who will just be like, you know, I've never worked with someone who's in your situation, but we're going to make it happen. And like Dr. Benson, our choral conductor here, he was fantastic in adapting the instructions for the conducting class to me and how I was doing it. And I like my brass teachers, my piano teachers, my like anything that's an odd situation where everybody kind of goes, how are we going to do this? And but the people who are like, no, we believe you can, and we're going to help you. And like those experiences are always the best. And I love the other thing that I love is that after a while, when I'm around like in a place for a while, people forget that I'm disabled. And I love that. And it makes for hilarious conversations sometimes. Like I once had a friend come up to me and be like, "Are these gloves yours, like full fingered gloves?" And I just kind of looked at her and I went, yeah, those are mine. And like, it's like things like that. Like those kinds of interactions are the best.
That's awesome. Thanks, Elizabeth. Briana, do you have anything to add?
I think everything everyone has said is absolutely awesome. I think the biggest thing with the wheelchair is that a lot of times, again, people underestimate you, and then when you prove them wrong, they're like, "Oh, wow, can you do that again?" And they're like, "Oh, I didn't expect that to come from you," or like, "Oh, wow, like." Okay. And I think what I've actually found is that my dance professors were always the ones who were the most collaborative and innovative with me in my improv dance and my modern dance class. With my undergrad, they helped me discover like the movement and dance through the wheelchair and how the lines can be created. And I mean, even today, how I like move through the space, I'm like, I'm always thinking like through the space now. But I think it's, you know, everything everyone has said, it's exactly what I think a lot of us go through. And it's, you know, we're constantly kind of having to like, you know, someone might tell us no, and we are like, all right, thanks, that's the motivation I needed, all right, here we go, I'm gonna prove you wrong. And it's so satisfying when you do prove them wrong and they're like, wow, okay, so I really need to rethink some of my thought processes and changing the narrative. And especially on a show production wise, I remember going in for my freshman audition, and this story got back to me later. So the professors watched my audition. This was before I was accepted. And my voice teacher was in a lesson, and the other professor came in, and they were like, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. He's like, but could you believe that? Like what? And they're like, there was no breathiness. She's been sitting, and like, they just were such an awe that, you know, such a sound could come out of someone who's been sitting, which I think at that point was, oh gosh, what was that? 2010, 7 years at that point. So, you know, it's always really heartwarming and wonderful. And, you know, you always got to find humor in it too. And you just kind of keep plowing forward and making your way. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are all really great things. I think this kind of goes into the next question, which is like, what are some of the things that you wish you had known or done earlier in your career? So all of y'all are doing so many like different things. So I think it would be really interesting to hear, like, you know, what would you tell your previous self?
I think I can jump in on this one. I'll jump here first. I really wish I would have told my younger self, especially looking at myself now, is that the wheelchair and my disability is just a piece of who I am. And I really wish some of the fear and like the hesitation in my younger years with music and fine arts wouldn't have been there. And now the confidence that I've come and to grow with my sound and with how I can move through the space or present a character is still just as satisfying and wonderful as any able-bodied performer next to myself. So I would just say, you know, have that confidence. You got this. And, you know, if someone does tell you no, you know, figure out a way that, you know, the yes, or, you know, you don't necessarily maybe don't want to work with them, and find other collaborators who are going to create something even better because your ideals align a lot better. So I think that's where I would tell myself, don't be afraid, go for everything.
Yeah, I can jump in here too. One of the biggest things that I wish that I had gotten through my head younger is that it is okay to ask for help, because I have always been fiercely independent. Like, I needed to prove that I could do the thing without help and on my own. And like, and that's well and good. And that's, I've been able to accomplish a lot that way. But there comes a point when, you know, being the only one using a music stand in choir is okay. Like, because I always think in my mind, I'm normal. Like, I am just me. And so to do anything that sets me apart even more from anyone else is like, I'm like, no, I'll find a way around it. And like, I am positive that like all my choir teachers throughout all the years have offered me music stands. And it wasn't until that I got to like San Jose State like a year ago that like somebody turned to me and was like, would a music stand make your life easier? And I was like, yeah, it would. And so, I mean, it's things like that. It's like accepting help when you need it is okay. And it doesn't make you any less independent or any less competent. It's like, that's what those things are there for. And I wish I had gotten that through my head a lot younger.
I can chime in here, which I'm going to keep mine short and simple, which is at least try to, which is really put yourself out there. I think that's the thing that I should have done when I was in community college, when I was, in undergraduate taking classes. Sure, I joined the DJ club. I played at piano recitals. I have sung in choirs and stuff like that. But however, I never joined any music clubs except for the DJ club. So and of course, when I joined the DJ club, I wasn't really marketing myself. I was marketing the club. So when I left, I realized that my clients weren't really like, I didn't have a big list of clients. I didn't have a big list of people that I could work with. So it was really, really difficult. So long story short, really put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to talk to people, because here's the thing. I always tell students, the university years are the best time to get to know people, because even though you might not connect with them right now, what if in the future they're like, hey, do you want to do this project with me? Now you're probably like, thank gosh I met this person, because now I get this great opportunity to collaborate with them. So just think of it that way. You might not be friends with them right now, but you might in the future. So, and also might be business partners in the future. So yeah, put yourself out there and don't be afraid to do so.
I think everyone here has said exactly what I would say, and I'm in a different stage of my career than the rest of the panel. I'm in my 30th year of teaching, so it's different. And but what I'll just say, what Jimmy said is absolutely true, because I find myself now, people who were in classes with me in grad school 15 years ago or in undergrad school call and hire me to do a lot of things. So it's very, very, very true to be kind no matter what. My parents reared me and my brothers to be independent. So I didn't really go through a lot of transition so much. I was ready to get out of the hospital after a week. I said to the doctor, I said, okay, well, that's done. Can we get on with my life? And he was kind of like, no, this is a major trauma. You've got to stay here. I was in the hospital for 6 weeks, and I was just going, I'm like, the worst part's over. Let's get on with life. And so, I was fortunate that I have a lot of instances in my life I can remember my parents setting me up to be independent, setting me up to succeed through problem solving and figuring things out. Maybe it's a divine, if you believe that, it's a divine notion that foresaw what I would have to do. So, but I am forever grateful that my parents were who they were, and so it made my transition extremely easy, going from an able-bodied person to an amputee.
Thanks so much for sharing all of that. That is so inspirational for me, just like as a growing musician alongside with a lot of you. So thank you for all of that. One of our final questions, there are two ways you can answer this. I'm just going to combine the last two questions on our list. What are some of your funniest stories? And then what do you wish able-bodied teachers, students, and coworkers already knew? You can answer it how you like.
So I can begin this by saying my favorite professors that I ever worked with are the people who are not afraid to ask questions. These are the people that are willing to adapt to any type of learning style. Now, like what I said before, would you rather hear someone say, oh, I have taught such and such type of disability before, and I just don't think you can survive my class? Or does it sound better if you say, I never have experienced this before, do you know what could be some of the hurdles that I should be aware of, and what should I be really doing to improve my lecture style? Now that's amazing when you hear that. You're like, oh wow, this person actually wants to listen to me. So using person first language, especially when when the person's in front of their peers, it's so important because you don't want to single them out because it's going to feel very embarrassing. Now, this is all universal design. It's a great universal design practice. And we, as people with disabilities, well, at least we don't expect you to understand everything about us. It is okay to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions, because bringing awareness to what we are experiencing is good, because sometimes, like the best way to learn is to get it through experience. Now, I would like to kind of give an example, which is I'm going to talk a very quick moment about Hamilton, which is, the musical that recently there's a live recording of it on Disney Plus. And why am I mentioning this musical? Well, I wanted to bring up captioning and audio description. Now, captioning, Hamilton is a musical that, like, literally there's these rap sequences that are like 1,000 words per second or something like that. It's something insane. And basically it's really difficult to like hear each word that's being said. So how do you actually read the words? Well, you turn on captioning. Then you can actually read what's happening. What about audio description? Well, audio description doesn't just help the blind or low vision. What if you're cooking? What if you're doing chores around the house and you just can't look at the screen that much? Well, you could turn on audio description and your visual content becomes kind of like a podcast. So all this type of stuff, you would think it's for accessibility purposes, but it's inclusivity. It really benefits people with disabilities. Furthermore, it benefits all consumers of your content, which is very, very cool. And I really, really enjoy when accessibility gets looked at in terms of this way, because people want to be more inclusive to their customers rather than trying to hope that they're doing something that's accessible. And that's basically what I realized and I wanted to share. So
Thanks, Jimmy.
yeah.
I can go next. I would say the biggest thing would be like on the production side of, just kind of broadening the horizons. So trying not to get stuck in one vision. So if you are presented with a student with a disability, kind of opening up that concept. So if you see a spiral staircase, how can you create it into ramps? Or if you can still have that spiral staircase, what other kind of levels can you have for, this other person? And, just really using those creative genes that we all have. I mean, we're artists. We shouldn't limit ourselves to a box. I mean, what box, right? So I think, just on a professor's production side or in any types of shows or things like that people may be involved in, just really thinking about different ways to be creative, and using these awesome tools that we're given to come up with something more creative, and which usually that ends up making the piece be more impactful and actually more dynamically interesting. So funniest story is probably when we figured out it is a wonderful comedic gesture when a wheelchair goes flying across the stage at about 100 miles an hour during Beauty and the Beast. I played Madame de la Grande Bouche, and when she sings that super high C or G or whatever you want to throw out there as she's chasing people off the stage, they literally like got a running start back off stage and like launched me on stage, and it was very fun to use the chair in such a wonderful comedic way while still having such a fun impact for a scene.
Dr. Packwood, I know you have so many great stories.
Yeah, I won't, some of them I probably can't say on here, but I will tell you two quick ones, I think. One is when students have excuses, which happens a lot. Students come in my office and say, Dr. Packwood, I couldn't, and I didn't, and they're trying to get, which some excuses are valid and these usually aren't. And I just say, really? You're gonna, and then they just look at me and go, never mind, just forget it, just never mind. So and that's one of the things that I find it amusing. This one is, this makes me laugh. And I don't say this to a lot of people. So this is the first time I've said this in public. I usually only say it to, like, if I'm with someone, a close friend, but if I'm at a performance and it's not very good, I don't have to be polite and clap, because I can say, well, I can't clap. So, I often, if I'm with a really close friend and something happens, I'll just go over and say, this is a great time to be one-handed. Let me tell you, you don't have to sit here and clap for this, because I just I can just sit there and go, okay, I don't have to go through, but isn't that awful? But anyway, now you know who I am. But I just want to encourage all of you with disabilities, being full body abled, whatever it is that you go after what you want and what you think you're doing. I still, after 30 years, I get butterflies before the first day of school. Going to my first class. I still get nervous. I still don't sleep before the first day of school. And I hope that never changes. I feel like if that changes, I need to probably re-examine what's going on. But I encourage you to go after what you want to do and figure it out. Just figure it out. Because for me, I always have a plan A, B, C, and D. I'm ready. If I go to my chair and my chair's, if I say, okay, if he says no, then we're going to do this. And if he says he's going to give me half the money, then I think we can go to the dean. And if he says go to the dean, then I'm going to talk to the provost. So you have to have those plans in whatever it is that you want to do.
Thanks so much, Dr. Packwood. And Elizabeth, you're the last one, and then we'll get to some of the questions.
All right. Okay, things that I wish other people had known. Well, first of all, and I haven't had any horrible experiences with this, but as I said, just like when you encounter disabled people or disabled students or whatever, don't make assumptions about what they can or can't do before you have a conversation, if necessary. Like, I mean, unwarranted conversations from strangers are not always welcome, but especially if you're a teacher, like, don't make assumptions about what your student can do before you have the conversation with them. And I mean, some of your students may not be comfortable having those conversations, but that was my experience as a student got better when I realized if I made that an open conversation from the start, that the classes just went smoother and it was easier. And the other thing is that as I said, I've always been very independent, very like, I'm gonna do the thing, but it still has meant the world to me when professors have been like, I see you and I know, I believe you can do this. And having somebody approach me, like in that position, be like, yes, I believe you can do this too, was always super encouraging to me. And the last thing is, if I'm laughing at a joke that I've made about myself, you are allowed to laugh too. As musicians love to compare hands when they're talking about playing the piano, and like about like how big people, like how far their hands can reach, and people will be like, oh, my hands are so small, and I'll be like, I got you beat. I have huge respect for the people who are willing to laugh with me about things like that. So
thank you so much, all of you. Those are all really wonderful things. Carl Ozer has a really wonderful question. Can you talk about how your disability has informed the way you interact with other people, especially those from marginalized communities? And or can you talk about how this part of your identity has informed / complicated your relationship with other parts of your identity, i.e. race, class, gender, etc.? It's a pretty complex question.
I think I can speak to the first half of the question. About, oh gosh, now 18 years ago, in December is when I had the tumor on my spine, and ever since then I really fiercely believed in advocating for those with disabilities. And as I got older and learned about more groups that were marginalized, the passions just grew. And so with people of color, LGBTQ plus, I feel with me being such a strong advocate inside the disability community, I just want to help the rest and get our equality rights across the board. And I feel the wheelchair gives me motivation and drive to really help those, because although I may not always be struggling, I might see my friends struggling, and I'm like, what can I do to help? I have a huge voice. Let me use it for you. Let me speak and help in whatever way I can, whether it's listening or whether it is, climbing up on a podium and, shouting at the top of my lungs in DC. I will go to bat. And I really feel that constantly having to advocate for myself my whole entire life has really just given me some really amazing tools to help the minority communities, including, of course, the disability community.
To add on to that, so like exactly what you said in terms of helping people, I as a disability specialist at UC San Diego, sure, I meet with students, I provide accommodations, but another part of my job is to do some outreach, like similar to stuff like this, to talk about inclusive design, and also to do some testing around the campus in terms of accessibility on websites, around the physical campus, if there's like an area that someone could twist their ankle, or if something's just, not too safe. Now, that's very, very crucial, because I feel like as a student, speaking from a student standpoint, we have so much stuff to worry about. All-nighters, midterms, all these projects, and such more. And you just don't have time to fight the system, to get this information to the people so they can make a change. So what personally, from a like someone who's actually a student and now is a staff member, I'm really trying my best to hear all the voices out there and basically bring awareness to everything that I learn from these panels, from audience members, and all that type of stuff. And to be honest, I probably wouldn't be like this if I didn't have my if I wasn't blind or low vision. I lost my vision for like more of my vision 4 years ago. I was still legally blind before that, but I lost more of my vision 4 years ago. And before that 4 years, I was just like, oh, I'm gonna become a video editor. I can do whatever the heck I want, And then now I realized I take definitely accessibility for granted, and not everything is accessible. There are companies out there that really need to think about accessibility, but there's also those companies that really think about accessibility. So bringing awareness, because we do have the ADA, we do have Section 504, but bringing awareness to why we need this, how it's helping us, is basically what I'm trying to do. And that's basically how I think of it. And that's how it builds me as a person today.
I'll just say this is a excellent question. And I've been thinking and thinking, and I'm not even sure how I would answer this, but I'll try and do it. Um, I don't know if I'll answer your question, but I'll tell you this. I, I got married after I had my accident. So that's the first thing. So that I think that part of it spoke to me with all my insecurities of who I was when I was your age, trying to be this for other people and trying to attract people, that whole craziness that you put your poor selves through in your 20s. That's what I would tell myself. I'd go back and tell myself to forget that foolishness if I could go back. But so that part of it worked out. And I always, at least I like to think that I've always been an advocate for marginalized people. But I think, as someone said earlier, once you're in the position, as somebody, I have several, I guess you could say, things that marginalize me. There are several things that marginalize me. I'm a Black man in a profession that is typically not. We don't have a lot of Western classical conductors who are Black in the country. They're growing, but not a lot. I'm a gay man living in Mississippi, openly doing this as well. And then I'm also disabled. So all of that rolls into how I interact. And, people, children, students, young people need to see people like them that they identify with being successful. And that is evident. When I came to Mississippi State 10 years ago, there were about, I can count them, about 7 Black kids singing music. There were no music majors who were Black. And there were 7 kids singing in the 3 ensembles there. And now it's about 50%. It's about 50% Black students in a program that has doubled in 10 years. There are about 300 kids singing. So, and I've had many students with varying degrees of disabilities. I had a young lady who was blind and she had a dog, and I would just say, that dog, those dogs are taught to not, jump on people and stuff like that. But I love dogs. I love dogs. And when she sometimes she'd bring the dog and sometimes she wouldn't. But man, when she brought that dog, I was just like, oh, we're gonna get your dog. And that dog started to kind of get out of his, it started to lose his training when he saw me. And she would say, Dr. Packwood, I know you must be in here because Susie's acting a little weird now. I said, I'm over here and I'm trying to control myself. But anyway, so I've had those students, and I think because of my disability, I think about what their needs might be. And not just because of disabled. I had a young lady who was in transition in my choir, and I didn't know how to. We had to start talking about uniforms, and I didn't know how to go about this, And so finally, I said, I need to talk to you after class, and I said, listen, I'm not trying to get in your business, but I need to know, are you gonna wear a dress? Do you wanna wear a dress? Do you wanna wear a tuxedo? Because at the time she was sort of dressing sort of neutral, lots of jeans and lots of just tops. And she broke down crying, just boo-hooing in my office when I asked her that. And I thought, oh boy, that's it, I'm done. And she said, no, nobody's ever asked me. She said, when I was at my junior college, they told me I couldn't wear a dress. No one ever asked me. And I said, well, I'm asking you. I said, you take the weekend, you figure it out, you come back on Monday, and whatever you want to do, we're going to do it. And, it was freeing for her, because from that day on, she completely dressed the way she wanted to dress. It was sort of that permission. So, so I do think that gender-wise, being aware of these people and approaching them in private, and because you don't know how people are going to react, so you pull them to the side or something. And with my with Black students, I think them seeing a Black man in a role that they didn't sometimes think was even possible is has helped as well.
Is there anything you want to add, Elizabeth?
I don't know that I have much more to add to that. I think everybody has pretty well covered it. The one thing I will say is, as somebody who's in the disabled community, I have seen some hopefully well-meaning but not always actually helpful attempts to make things, to like change terminology or something, like to give us labels that they think is more politically correct or something like that. And I know there's a lot of talk about how we speak about marginalized groups and how to fix issues. And when you're coming up with solutions, make sure that the marginalized group is in the room when you are making that solution, because otherwise you can end up doing more harm than good. And so that's my 2 cents on that.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Jimmy, Briana, Dr. Packwood, I'm so happy that we had this conversation. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.